Hi, I wanted to do a follow-up video today to the video that I did previously about food. And I'm magically wearing the perfect shirt for this video, totally by accident. Food is spirit. And I wanted to talk today about exactly that, actually, and the different energetic vibrations of different ways of eating and different foods. So I think a good foundation for this is to just talk for a second about the way in which we operate on two levels really at the same time. David Hawkins talks about this in his book. I've heard Abraham Hicks mention it, and it's just one of those things that's just obviously true also, that we are both this form and that whatever enlivens and enervates this form as well. So we are the life force that creates life through us and permeates all of our form. And then we're also that form. So there's this mortal coil, and then there is the energy that enlivens that. And you can look at this in terms of any kind of habit or practice or activity, whether it feeds that enlivened energy or whether it depletes and removes or takes away energy from that whole system. And food, I think, is one of the biggest contributors and ways that you can impact vibrationally what you're experiencing in form. It's something that I've been really aware of since changing my diet many, many years ago and continuing to eat this way. And my diet actually continues also to evolve based on what I feel in my body and what I feel to consume and not to consume. So I think of it this way. David Hawkins, if you're familiar with him, in his book Letting Go, also in some other of his books, he talks about the different energetic levels or vibrational levels of different emotions. So courage being the one that sort of is the flip from negative to positive, and they are all numerically rated from low to high. And in my experience, food is the same way. There could be a chart, vibrational energy chart as well for food. And it becomes really clear when you're eating that way, when you're eating very cleanly, you can definitely feel those different vibrational shifts or drops or raises in that energy depending on what you eat. So if you've watched my stuff for a while, you know I've eaten a raw vegan diet for a long time, for over 12 years. Almost 12 years? Over 12 years. Anyway, a long time. And so what that means is I eat fruits, vegetables, nuts, and seeds. And those are minimally processed. And by minimally processed, I include things like chopping, blending, and using a food processor. And I will tell you that the more time that goes by, the less I want to do any processing to my food. And the more clear it is to me that I actually got the other day, this just revelation. I was reading, I was just flipping through Anthony Williams' book about healing foods and just reading some of his information that he provides in that book about specific foods. And noticing, I don't have that experience with this food, or I really do, or I want to experiment more with this or that. And what I really noticed, and this realization I had, was that the description he has of some of those foods and the effect on the body, I believe, are mitigated or downgraded often by processing them. So, and even blending them. So, and that makes a ton of sense to me, and it makes a ton of sense to my body and to my experience that I've had with food. So that's just an example of that evolution of my diet as I just continue to go on this path. But if we were to make a chart like David Hawkins does of the vibrational energy of foods, and you can relate this also to, I'm not positive I'm saying this right, but Kirlian images, the images where they show the glow around food, and raw foods and unprocessed foods are much brighter and more uniform than cooked or processed foods are. So I think all of this really goes together. And my interpretation from my own experience and what makes obvious sense to me is that the closer we actually eat to light, the healthier it is for our body, and the higher the vibration of both the food and then our bodies as our bodies create themselves, partly from what we're consuming. So there are breatharians. If you've seen that, they're people that just live on light. Obviously, plants live on light. They photosynthesize. And so plants, so if you start at the top with light, the sun's energy, so some people survive on that. I don't recommend trying that yourself. I think it's a process I don't do that myself, but I don't question that is real, because plants are eating light. And so the closer we can get to that sunlight source, the closer we can get to light, the more light energetically those foods are, and thus our bodies become. And that is definitely my experience in eating. In fact, I have used that in the past to get to a certain feeling in my body. So sometimes if I'm only eating greens, I'm eating a lot of sprouts, I'm eating just very, very high vibration foods, there has been a tendency in the past to feel really kind of spacey a little bit, and airy. Fruit, sometimes people will have that experience if they're fruitarians. And I would use energetically denser foods to actually sort of bring myself back into my body, bring my experience and my awareness back into my body. So I would sometimes even like go eat an egg and bam, or I remember one time having potatoes and wham, back in the body. And there's a certain sense of that feels good, but there's also a real heaviness to it. And there's a very clear vibrational change, and change in awareness and consciousness as well. So if we were to look at those foods in a David Hawkins vibrational scale-like way, we would say, consuming light, and then consuming plants, living plants, like sprouts, that kind of a thing. I had a discussion yesterday or the day before with a friend, and we were talking about living foods and what does living foods mean. And so plants, if you pick some lettuce or an apple or any kind of plant and you don't process it, you put it on the counter, it continues to live for a certain period of time, and will slowly that life force will go away over time, and depending on how you're storing it, that kind of thing. Whereas if you eat an animal, as soon as you kill that animal, that life force is gone and decay sets in. So plant foods are living when you eat them, if you're eating them at the right time, right? If you're eating them before that life force is gone, before they're rotten. We don't tend to eat rotten things. So, and then there are plants that are very much higher on that vibrational scale than others. So for instance, if you're eating sprouts, if you're eating, to me, any kind of leafy green, those are very high vibrational foods. And then if you're eating a nut or a seed, and those have not been heat processed or chemically processed, and you could put them in the ground, they'll still grow. The same with a seed from an apple, or as long as they're not genetically modified, they will still grow. So you can stick the seed or the nut or the the part you cut off before you eat it on the lettuce. That will grow again if you put it in water. So those are still living. They still have that life force in them. And when we consume them, that life force is transferred to us. And it's very palpable. I can feel that when that happens. And when you're used to eating high vibrational living foods like that, and you eat something like a piece of meat, the vibration is, which I haven't done in a really, really long time, and I wouldn't do that. But if you were just to eat something very low vibrational, that shift is, wow, it's intense. It would be intense. And even for me, just eating an egg, that shift is so clear. And even now I'm noticing when I'm eating more processed foods. For instance, I made a raw chili the other night in Laurel Anderson's book. Oh my gosh, it's so good. But I'm not used to eating food that's processed anymore. I really like that. And by processed, I'm just talking about I did it in the food processor and chopped it up some. But it changes the food, and then there was some blending involved in the sauce as well, and there was a cream sauce also. My shirt, by the way, is from Wild Living Foods in LA, which I really love. But they use too many cashews, and cashews are not my friend. But just doing that amount of processing lowers that vibration and changes the way my body processes it. So, which makes a lot of sense, because if you think about if you just eat a tomato and it enters your body the way your body was designed to process foods itself, because in a sense your body is a food processor. So you chew it up. You swallow it. Your body intakes it in a specific way that it was obviously evolved to do. And when you start messing with that, you kind of start messing with the whole process that your body has evolved to process its food in its own natural way. So if I'm blending that tomato and making, I was making like a tomato sauce basically, or chili sauce. By blending, you increase the surface area of that food just insanely a lot, right? Exponentially is the word I was looking for. You increase the surface area of everything you're blending so that when it hits your mouth, it's already basically part of that digestion has happened. And when as your body normally would take in just the whole tomato, it would break down differently in your body, because that part of chewing to that fine amount that wouldn't happen, right? The way you blend it wouldn't happen. So it's hitting your body with this extra surface area. The digestion is starting essentially at kind of a different stage, and my body processes it differently. So it's a subtle level, but it's kind of at the subtle level that I'm noticing where my body's responding to what I'm eating, and I can kind of tweak things. And I am only going more and more in the direction of just eating foods in their natural state. So it's actually just getting easier and easier for me to eat, because I rarely make like a processed dish like that. Even though it was really yummy and it was fun to have something different, I also ate it too late at night. I ate it not very long before I went to bed, and it was heavy on almonds. So even though they were soaked, they for 24 hours they were still, it still was, my body was not used to that amount of heavy food, or that heavy food at all, and particularly that late. And I had a really difficult, even though I slept all night, I still woke up like, oh my gosh, knowing my body had just had to spend that whole night digesting rather than just healing. So that was a good lesson to me. But it was a special night, and I made a special dish for special friends who came over. So it was also fun, but it was a really clear and good reminder to me about how sensitive my body is. And some people will talk about, oh, well, I don't want to eat really healthy because my body's going to get so sensitive that I won't be able to eat anything. And that argument to me is kind of crazy, honestly, because sensitive is good. It means you're actually perceiving what's there and not just numbing out. If you're not perceiving it and you're not sensitive, you're just not perceiving what's actually happening. And I think, in a sense, your body's on a much sort of lower level of being able to process and use what you're eating efficiently, because you're kind of numbed out to what's going on. So you can eat a bag of Doritos and nothing happens, or a couple hot dogs and a hamburger, and you don't notice the difference. It's not because your body's running optimally on that input or that intake. It's that you're not aware of what's happening in your body. And the cleaner you eat, the more aware you become actually of the effect that what you're eating has on your body. So I'm just finding that eating those high vibrational foods is not only physically rejuvenating and helps my body to heal, but it also brings those two layers of existence, that mortal coil and the life force, closer and closer in alignment. And what I find in my life is that this space between those two causes pain and suffering for the individual, because you're not, and this feeling of, I'm not living my real life, or I'm not acting authentically, or I'm not just being really me. And what we really desire is for those levels to really merge, and for us to live out the truth of who we are in this form. So, and what I find is, in the realm of food, what we're intaking, the closer I can get to that light source, to that sun energy, the lighter my form is, the more transparent or translucent the form is, and the enervating energy, the enervating life force becomes more infused into the form, and that becomes more of my experience, even in my conversations with people. Like, a handyman came over the other day, and I used to be so impressed with Kyle because, someone would come over, the plumber would come over, and I'd come upstairs and they'd be talking, oneness. And I'm like, wow, the difference for me was, I lived here when I was alone and with certain people who I knew could vibe with me at that sort of frequency. But then the form life primarily wasn't really aligned as much with that. And the more time that goes by, the more I am in tune and touch and acting on what my body's telling me, which includes eating these higher vibrational foods, the more these two layers really become enmeshed and joined. And really, really they're one. anyway, but our experience tends to be this. So to me, that's what we're kind of after, is for this oneness to be embodied in our form. And that's something I find that is affected by the foods I eat. So the closer to the light source you can eat, the more I notice that the vibration is higher, the form is lighter, and those two levels are more one in my life. And the more processing that happens, if you would go down that list, if you were to give numerical values, and I imagine there's a way to do that. I'm not exactly sure how they calibrated the emotions. You can feel them in your body, but there's a way that they calibrated them numerically. I would imagine there's a way to do that with foods, and maybe that's already been done. And if anybody knows about that and wants to put that in the comments, that would be amazing. I would love to look at that. You can clearly feel it in your body, just as you can feel the different vibrations of different emotions. But the more processing and the more dead, or the longer that time that food has been out of its living environment, like the dirt, or off of the tree or off of the vine, the lower on that scale that food is. So a sprout picked right out of the ground, or just taken out of the sprouting jar, is alive. That alive energy is going into you. And I know that sounds kind of woo-woo, but it isn't. It actually is. It's just a fact, and you can feel it when you're eating it. So you could experiment with yourself, try some sprouts and then try a hamburger, but also I think your body has to be kind of cleared out and used to feeling those more subtle energies. But the more processing that happens, you start to, get down to, things in a grocery store. Also, these high vibrational foods, if they're also tended to with love and respect and care. I'll go back to that book that I mentioned the other day, The Secret Life of Plants, and how plants respond chemically to our intentions and our thoughts. You can see how that makes sense, and how they would be plants raised with love and the intention to nurture and that kind of thing would be a very different energy in your body than sort of a corporately produced, non-organic. No one cares about it. It's just kind of a mechanistic process, and then put into a box. Maybe some of the nutrients taken out, maybe some added. Maybe it's heat processed, chemically processed, and then you cook it at home. It's just more and more depleting the life energy that was originally there. And you can see it, I guess, most clearly in animals. Like I said, when you kill an animal, maybe if you ate it right there, which who would do that? We as humans don't really have the desire to go eat a dead animal that we find. I think, speaking to kind of, what our bodies are designed to eat and what we prefer to eat, we've got to cook it. We've got to put a lot of spices on it. We have to do a lot of stuff to an animal before we'll eat it in general, unless we're just literally starving. But it's very clear, like, you kill that animal, the life energy is gone, then you have to do all this stuff to it. And it's at the end of the day, when you actually are consuming that, especially if you're buying it from the store, and it was, raised poorly on non-organic food and was afraid when it was killed, and, all the things, you are getting down to a very heavy vibration, and you can feel that when you eat it. I remember the last time I ate an animal product except for an egg was many, many years ago. I let a friend talk me into eating pate. Why? I don't know. I was on a modeling gig. He was a good friend of mine. I think we had a glass of wine or something. Did not have the awareness I have now. And I ate that, and it was just terrible. Like, I didn't have any physical, stomach upset or anything like that, but the energetic drop that happened, and that process that happens when geese are force fed to make their liver basically expand to explosion, like that, how much pain and suffering are they in? And you're consuming that energy as well. And on top of that, it's cooked and seasoned and whatever else processed. That's the heaviest thing I've ever felt in a really long time. And that was like a turning point in my life and a realization of, oh my God, I actually feel what this animal went through, and I feel this pain and heaviness that's in that food. So those are probably the two ends of the spectrum, like very sunlight, first of all, but then like sprouts or a tomato, or, something picked right off the vine or the tree, has the most life energy, has the most sun energy in it, and then a dead animal that's been processed and seasoned and cooked, and probably is the other end of the spectrum. So, and everywhere in between that is sort of a level of processing. Animal foods, I would say, just are probably like that level of courage where it's the turning point. I'm talking about the numerical value in David Hawkins' book. Probably the turning point where it's just negative once you go to animal foods. In my experience, in my body's experience, in my energetic, spiritual experience of that. And then you would start going up with like very processed foods, plant foods, that have been, sitting in a warehouse forever. Nobody cares about them. They were just part of a mechanical process, going all the way up, like I said, to breatharianism, and right under that, like very alive foods. So I'm going to leave it at that. That was really long. That was, I always think, oh, I'm going to sit down for a second and talk to you guys. But that's a topic I've been thinking a lot about and experiencing a lot about in my food journey. So thanks so much for sticking with me and listening to me on this, and wishing you the best. Happy Mother's Day.